Hey everybody, welcome to Hunters Connect. I'm Zach, and today we're going to be talking about how to clean and prepare a turkey for the freezer. The things that we're going to need are obviously a turkey, a sharp knife, a pair of gloves, and some gallon bags. I just have standard gallon Ziploc bags here. First thing I'm going to do is get the gloves on. It obviously helps to have a really sharp knife. That's the most important part here. First thing that you're going to want to do is you're going to want to find the breastbone. It's pretty easy to find, right in the center of the body. And I just start by making a small incision right on that breastbone. Then, to start to expose the meat, I usually just peel it straight back. It's just kind of like skinning a deer or anything else. The hide just kind of peels right off. The biggest thing is you're going to want to try to fold the feathers back away from the meat. It's not a big deal if you get feathers on it. It's going to happen inevitably. But one other thing that really helps just kind of peel that back is if you take these back legs and you just push them apart and kind of pop them apart. It just gives you a little bit more room to work with. So now that I've got those pressed down and the skin started to peel back, I've got one of the sides of the breast exposed here. All right, so now that you've got your meat exposed here, you're just gonna take your knife and run it right down along that breastbone. That's gonna make sure you get the most out of the meat, and it's gonna separate these two sides of the breast here. So I'm gonna just start going down through here, running that knife, just like you would when you're filleting a fish. You just stand right as close to that bone as you possibly can. You can even almost pull the meat back and just slide it off. Pretty tender in there. From here, you're basically just following the bone and just peeling that meat back. One other small tip here that can really help you out as far as having a good clean piece of meat to cook. There's this inside tenderloin here. This is the breast on top, and that's your big chunk of meat. And once you start cutting in, you'll see there's this smaller separate piece of meat. As you're cutting that back, it starts to separate, but inside of that there's a piece of silver skin right down the middle of it. So once you cut all the way down to the bottom and you find where that tenderloin connects, if you grab it at the base, you can just slowly peel back with your hand and your knife. Just take that meat right off there. And now that you've got that off there, you've got that tender piece of meat without that silver skin in there. So if you want, you can put that in a separate bag. It's generally what I do. I like to eat the tenderloins by themselves. They're probably the best part of the turkey. So just go ahead and throw one in the bag here. As you're taking off this breast, it's also easier to take a lot of this fat and stuff off now rather than later. Once you got the breast off, it's a lot harder to grab a hold of that fat and peel it back. So a lot of times I'll just run down right along the edge, just take off a little bit of the fat. So once you get all the way through, just come down to the end here. Cut it right off. So now you've got your tenderloin out of there, and separately you have this big chunk of breast meat here. So now you should have a clean piece of breast meat. That's the bulk of the meat of the turkey there. So that's that piece of silver skin that's within the tenderloin. That's just gonna make things a lot easier. Like I said, when you go to cook it, you don't have to chew on that thing. So now I'll just take a separate bag. Depending on how you want to do it, how you think you're going to eat it, you can either go one breast per bag or two breasts per bag. But now I've got a bag of tenderloins here, breast, and that's one side of the turkey. Now, just do the same exact thing on the other side. So one thing on your second side, you can grab that fat, and this is a little bit better. And this is a good example. You can just pull that fat back and just cut right down along that meat. That way you don't have to do it later. All right, so now I've got all the breast meat out of the turkey. Both sides are cut out of there. Got as many of the feathers and fat off as I can. So you've got 2 clean breasts and 2 clean tenderloins. So then the next thing that you're gonna wanna do is, now that you've kind of peeled these legs back a little bit, there's skin and feathers that run all the way down to the joint of the leg. So what you're gonna do from where you cut earlier, you're just gonna slowly cut down that leg all the way down to that joint. And then once you've cut down, you're gonna just kind of do that same thing. You're just gonna peel that skin back, trying to keep the feathers away from the meat the best you can. Now in order to get these legs off at that joint, you're just gonna wanna cut right on the joint, basically completely around it. Then just pop that leg off. Cut the tendons off. Then you can cut off any of these extra feathers that you got on there. So now you've got a leg cut off at that lower joint, and where you're gonna cut it here is you're gonna go all the way up to where you can find the joint that connects it to the rest of the body. From there, you're just gonna take your knife, run right down along that joint. Getting as much of that meat off there as you can. And right where that joint is, if you find the right spot, you can just cut right through. You've got turkey leg cut perfectly at the joint. So now, I'm just gonna go ahead and do the same thing on the other side. So now that I got all these different pieces of meat in the bag, the biggest thing that you wanna do is try to make sure that there's no air in this bag. If you have some sort of food saver bag that will suck all the air out of it, that's the ideal thing. But if you're gonna just be putting these in the freezer for a couple days, couple weeks, you'll be fine with just a regular Ziploc gallon bag. I just always try to make sure to get as much of that air out of there as possible. And that should last for a pretty long time. That'll last several months there. And then you just do the same with these breasts as well. And the breasts are a little bit easier to get that air out of. Always just press them down to the bottom of the bag, push the air out, start to zip the bag, leave a corner here. You can even just kind of roll up the bag to press all that air out of there. You've got 2 legs, 2 different breasts, and then the tenders. So now those are ready for the freezer. If you're at home, you can throw them right into the freezer, obviously, or like what we're doing a lot of times when we're on the road camping, we just throw them on ice immediately. It'd be good to go. Hopefully this video helps you get your bird from the field to the table this spring.